hello.
Hello, hello.
How is everyone? Another
I'm
day.
fine.
Thanks.
How about you, Simon?
I'm good.
You'd think I hadn't seen you 5 minutes ago.
I know, right? Do you know what? Last week, Flutter Vikings, absolutely amazing. Sorry, everyone, we had to delay the show for a week, and you know, it's all good. So we have a jam, sort of a fun-filled day for you all to join us in, and we're gonna be talking about the Flutter Puzzle Hack again, and specifically Rive. And we do have a couple of things we're going to go through first before we get going. So Scott, this is the Flutter Puzzle Hack. Give us a bit of information about the do's and don'ts, please.
Be decent to each other. That's it. No. I know we're on YouTube. I know this is YouTube comments. Please be decent anyway. Don't post anything that's adult, rude, offensive. I mean, it's just pretty much common sense, folks. What's not typically common sense, please don't advertise your services. Don't advertise looking for developers. And the big one that people can't quite seem to get right is don't post your same question over and over and over again. If you can see your question on the screen still, don't type it again, clearly. But if you've typed the question within the past 10 minutes, don't put it in again. If we keep seeing questions over and over like that, they're going to get bumped to the bottom of the list. And a lot of times we can't get to everything, which means we might not get to yours.
And luckily, we do have a magic question answer in the background, Randall.
Yes.
And he's going to be bringing our questions to our attention during the stream. And just to let everyone know, please make sure you put a Q in front of your questions so we can identify them in the chat. That'd be really handy.
Makes them easy to find.
And
we have one more thing.
I'll go for it.
One more on the do's and don'ts. That is that please remember, all the people in the community who run the various things, such as the Slack and here and everywhere else, we all share a ban list. We've all known each other for about 4 years now. And we all decided that the simple thing to do was to set one code of conduct for everywhere. And if someone violates it here, we will be sending emails, and you might find your accounts on other things, such as the Slack, suddenly disappear.
So in short, be nice to each other, right?
Yes.
So
I would say be excellent to each other, but I don't want to get sued.
So, just a little brief intro of who we got on the stream today and who I am and who Scott is. So my name's Simon Lightfoot. I'm a community leader and CTO at Dev Angels in London. And you can follow me on this very Twitter address. Scott.
I am Scott Stahl, community leader, along with Simon. We've been doing this for a while. I'm also organizer of GDG Cleveland and a slave at Dev Angels London, but I'm not in London.
And we're going to introduce someone new to the stream today because Kelvin couldn't make it. Greg, welcome.
Great.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, you may have seen me darkening this doorway before. No, I'm Craig LeBenz. I'm a developer relations engineer at Google, and I work on Flutter.
Nice. So
finally, Craig originally was trying to get to work on Flutter, and you went the circular route, didn't you? What,
Fuchsia? I took the scenic route.
Cloud and Fuchsia, or Fuchsia and Cloud first?
One of those orders, yep. But working on Flutter now, so here we are.
Yeah. So Craig, tell us a little bit about Flutter Puzzle Hack. What is it?
Yeah, so it's the current challenge from the geniuses in the Flutter marketing department, and a lot of folks know the kind of basic Flutter or the slide challenge or puzzle slide. Wait, what is it? This thing you can call
slide puzzle?
Slide puzzle. Those are the words. Where you've got however many squares. There's one empty square, and you can click to slide something adjacent to the empty square in, and the goal is to reorder them all. So there's been a sample of this made by the good folks at Very Good Ventures. You can find that link in the description. And that just kind of gets you started. But from there, you've got a pretty blank canvas. You just have to stick to the spirit of this type of challenge. People are making it multiplayer. People are adding crazy animations. People are doing all kinds of things, adding auto solvers. I mean, really awesome ideas out there. So you just kind of put your personal spin on this. And in the end, there's a huge slew of prizes, something to $50,000, some giant cash prizes, some are decked out MacBook Pros for up-leveling your development environment. So it's a pretty cool initiative, pretty cool little campaign. All the descriptions to that source code and contest rules are in the description of this video. But today we're hoping to seed some more ideas for everybody by highlighting Rive specifically. And if you don't know Rive, you don't know what they're about, you are about to find out, because we've got Zach and Michael here. And they are in developer and design relations, respectively, at Rive. So that's enough from me. Zach and Michael, why don't you learn us good?
Yeah, we'll leave the stream to you guys, and the stage is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us again. Michael and I are excited to be here to talk about Puzzle Hack and what Puzzle Hack is, what we can offer, or what Rive can offer, and give you a snippet into how you can help make your projects kind of come to life. So to get things started, here's us. Michael and I work both in creator relations at Rive, and you can find us at Twitter. So just to kind of go over an overview of things shortly here, we'll be talking a little bit about what Rive is and how you can use Rive design tooling to create rich animations and designs, and then how you can easily integrate them into your Flutter applications. So we want to stress that we love this idea of reimagining the puzzle challenge because it allows for a lot of creative liberty and opportunity to stand out with your Puzzle Hack apps. And so you can really stand out from the the other applications when it comes to judging and make it just a really fun experience. But before we get into the selling of Rive and everything, we want to take a look at and a deeper look at probably the most important part of this puzzle app, and that is this bird, Dash. You probably all know Dash. Dash is a very big pillar of the Flutter community and is very well loved. And so in this app, in the Puzzle Hack app, you'll recognize that this is the static asset that shows initially in the starter code base. And so when we at Rive looked at this Puzzle Hack challenge, we looked at it and said, well, Dash is pretty statue-like here. It's not really moving, but we know that Dash has wants and needs too. So we wanted to recognize that. So Dash just wants to dance sometimes. I mean, we all have wants and needs. And so this is Dash's. I think we could probably help Dash out here a bit. So we could probably give Dash some bones to move around a bit. This will allow us to control the joints easier, help us control and move different parts of Dash's body. And so what if we gave Dash a few dance lessons on how to move? Well, Dash is dancing now, so happy, full of life, ready to take on the world. Imagine like what a few other dance lessons could do for Dash. So that kind of begs the question, like, how did we make Dash dance? And so this is where Rive comes in. So Rive allows you, again, to create rich animations and interactive content that you can play anywhere. And from anywhere, I mean your iOS apps, React apps, Android, whatever it might be. But in this case, I think of particular note for the audience, Flutter applications. And so we have two parts of this. We have a web-based editor tool that allows you to create these design assets so you can work entirely on the browser. No need to download anything. And then when it comes time to take these animations into your applications, there's no need to recreate animations from scratch in your code. And so another thing you can do with Rive is that you can define the interactions that drive these transitions between your animations, and you can use our state machine feature to do this in the editor and test how it all works out in Rive. And really the best part is you can see how it works in the editor, and it won't change when you bring it over to runtime in your Flutter apps. It should just all work the same, no surprises later. So again, yeah, we have the editor part where you can design those assets, and then you can just take those assets and bring those over into your runtime applications. In this case, you might want to bring it over to your Puzzle Hack applications. And so later on, we'll show you how quick and easy it is to set up in your Flutter apps. But first, Michael is going to give us a walkthrough of how to use the Rive editor tool to build out animations just like Dancing Dash.
All right. Thank you, Zach. So yeah, let's dive in and take a look at how we made Dash dance and move. So the first thing that we did is grab that PNG file from the initial project. And I went ahead and started separating Dash into separate pieces, that kind of planning out what I wanted to animate and how I wanted Dash to move. So things like the body, the wings, the legs, the feet, and the face. So I did this work in Photoshop, but there's free options you could use for photo editing like GIMP or Krita. And if you're working on an iPad, Procreate's also a great app for roster manipulation and editing. So a cool thing is Rive just recently introduced the ability to import and work with raster assets. So that's kind of what made taking that PNG file and bringing it into Rive possible. So it's as simple as just dragging your assets from a file browser right into the Rive assets panel, as you can see here. So after I've gotten those imported into the Rive editor, I can drag those assets onto my artboard and then just position and arrange them in order to put our friend Dash back together. So I know that I'm going to want to use bones in order to rig Dash's legs. That way we can use the Rive's IK constraints, which will just make it easier to animate the legs without having to rotate every joint and every bone. I've also created a bone for the body, the wings, and the head feathers. For the face, I created an empty target group and then added transform constraints to both of the eyes and the eye mask and beak layer. And that lets me parent those essentially to the target group. And I can just control all that with one control group. And I can set different strengths for each layer. And it kind of gives a nice parallax effect. And so I only have to worry about keying positions for that group. And from here, it's just a matter of utilizing some basic animation principles, rotation, squash and stretch, and we've got an idle and a dancing state for Dash. One of the coolest things and what really got me excited about Rive is the ability to make animations truly interactive right in the editor using a state machine. So here I've added a Boolean input that toggles Dash's animation between the idle and the dance state. And you can test this right in the editor. So you can set up your animations and you can actually have them blend in between different states. So here you can see I've got the idle and the dance kind of toggling back and forth. And after we finalized all the details, got the animations we wanted, Zach is able to export and download the runtimes needed, and we could get Dash up and running in the puzzle project. So Dash was a star of the show, but there's also the supporting animations and design. So things like the tile animations, the puzzle background, and the star effect were all built in Rive using the robust vector design tools. You can add solid fills, gradients, and strokes to your vector shapes. And that's what I used to create the tiles as well as the puzzle background. I added some simple animations to the tiles as they move around the board, and also created a small celebration that plays every time the user moves a tile to the correct position on the board.
Awesome. So now that we've taken a look at how to do things in the editor, we can bring this over to our runtime app, our Flutter app, the Puzzle Hack Challenge. So to start things off, I just want to bring up that we have a bunch of open source libraries for our different runtimes. For note of this audience, we have a Rive package in pub.dev. So you can find us there. We have a lot of documentation that allows you to easily integrate your animations into your applications. You treat it basically as an asset those exported animations that you took from the editor, and you just plop it in your applications. And so you'll find more documentation on the high-level APIs, and really a lot of expansive stuff that you could do to really enhance your animation experience in the app and make it interactive. But for today, we'll focus on some of the high-level APIs from the package to integrate. And these are all open source, by the way. So for the first thing, you're going to go into your Puzzle Hack projects and go into the pubspec YAML file. In the first screenshot here, you'll note that I added Rive under the dependencies section. So this just allows it to install Rive locally for your project. And then another thing that we want to do in this file is go down to the Flutter config section, where we have the assets set up. Basically, we're going to drag and drop that Rive file that we took from the editor and place it in our project. We're just creating another path to point to this new Rive file, so we can pull this from the asset bundle in our project as well. So just to show again what that looks like from the editor, you can go to the share icon and then go to the download for the newest runtime. That'll download a file. And then you can drag and drop that into your project. You can see in that second screenshot there, I added a new Rive directory and I renamed it burb.rive. You can rename the file however you want, though. So next, let's try and get this animation set up. So you can do this in a new file or an existing file, wherever you need it to. But you're just going to import the Rive dependency at the top of the file there, like so, in the first line. And then I'm going to build a stateful widget, and I'll go over a bit why I'm going to do that in a bit. But in the build method, we're going to use the Rive APIs, in this case, Rive animation.asset, to pull in that Rive file. So what this is doing is it's instantiating a Rive object in the build, so you can see it pop up in the screen. And the .asset part is basically saying we want to pull it from the asset bundle. So that first argument there is the path to that asset, just like we described in that pubspec YAML file. And so that's going to pull in that Rive file. You don't need to know how to translate that. This object, this API is going to do it for you. And secondly, if you remember, in this file, there were a bunch of different animations that Michael was working with, from different tile animations to the star, the congrats thing. For this case, we just want to work with getting Dash to show up. So we're going to put in the artboard name for that, which is burb, in the files. And you can reference these in the editor to find these names. And so when I render that out, it should render this animation that you see here, burb just kind of in that idle state like Michael had. And in a lot of cases, if you just have a simple animation, that's all you need to get started with using Rive. It'll display the first animation it sees. You could also define different animations that you might have associated with that artboard. Really, the possibilities are endless here. But yeah, it's as simple as this. But while this is pretty nice, we have Dash kind of breathing and idling. We need to remember kind of one thing here, and that's Dash really wants to dance. So we need to take it a step further and use that state machine that Michael showed in the editor earlier to make interactive content. Let's imagine that Dash is in that idling state, and that maybe when we tap on that on Dash in the app, then it goes into the dancing kind of animation that you saw earlier in the presentation. So to do that, we're going to do a few steps here. So in that initialization, we're going to add a new parameter called state machines and give it the name of the state machine to automatically play. In this case, it's called burb. Again, you can reference these names in the editor. And this will start off the state machine once it starts rendering. The state machine starts off with the idling state, so you'll see Dash initially just idling. And then the second parameter that we want to add to this constructor is the onInit parameter. And so this allows you to feed a initialization callback so that when Rive loads up, we get more data about the Rive file and the artboard that's about to display. And in that case, we can extract more data to get the state machine up and running and things like that. So in that initialization method, let's dig into that a little bit more. we have that on Rive init method, and it's just going to be a void method. There's nothing to return there, but you can see the first argument that we get is the artboard. The artboard encompasses all the animations, the state machines in this secular space. And so we want to get this state machine controller from the artboard. We specify the name of that state machine that we want to get. So again, we're getting a burb. And what the state machine is going to do is it's going to allow us to get those inputs that Michael created, that Boolean input that triggered whether or not Dash was idling or whether Dash was dancing. And so we'll get that controller, we'll associate it with the artboard, just so the artboard knows how to advance the different animations as we interact with these inputs. And then we're also going to define the stateful variable called isDancing. Normally, if you're using a gesture input, a gesture detector, you might just have a regular Boolean variable like isDancing, and it's just a true/false value, and you toggle that whether when the tap happens. Like if it's on, if it's tapped and it's true, then it goes to false, and vice versa. In this case, we want to not only have a source of truth for that state variable, but we also want a variable that's going to advance the state machine for us, just like we saw in the editor. So from that state machine controller, we're going to find that input. And again, you can find the name in the editor. It happens to be that the input name is dance. So you can see we're doing the controller.findInput and setting that as SMI bool. This is short for state machine input Boolean, which is just the type of that input from Rive. And so we'll set it initially to false so that initially Dash isn't dancing. And so now we can have this state variable called isDancing. That's our source of truth for toggling whether or not Dash is dancing. Let's connect that gesture detector that comes packaged in with Flutter and add an onTap method here. And so you can see we're referencing that isDancing SMI bool variable. We just have to access the value property of it and toggle back and forth whether or not it's true or false. And the nice thing about updating it like this is that you don't need to tell Rive basically like, hey, advance to the next animation. Just by changing this input value, you get that for free. And so that's a really nice thing that you don't have to worry about. And so putting this kind of all together, we have Dancing Dash. So you can see here, as I click on it, it toggles that isDancing variable. It'll go back and forth between the idling state and the dancing state. And so this is a way to utilize the state machine to really do some complex interactive content, or sorry, not complex, simple interactive content in your applications, and connect user interactions to trigger dancing, whether you want it to fly, whatever you need it to be. You can really, the possibilities are endless here. And so we also did, again, we had other animations in that Rive file that Michael was showing. The possibilities are endless when you try and use Rive. It's free to sign up. You can make your app stand out on a creative and fun front. You can see here that not only do we have Dancing Dash, but almost everything in that puzzle board is an animation. You can see Dash kind of peeping up when you hover over that empty slot, or the star coming in when you get it into the correct numbered spot as well. And so, yeah, you can check us out at rive.app. We have a bunch of resources for getting started. There's a lot of resources in terms of videos or blog content, so that you don't have to be a designer or an animator to know how to do these things. There's a lot of tutorials to help you get started with even the simplest kind of animation, simplest designs. And there's a plethora of YouTube series that we have at disposal to help you. So another thing that we have on our site is a community. So we have a public community space so you can share your Rive creations, and you can explore all of these animations as well. So for example, if you liked that Christmas tree that you see here, you could look into a preview version of that Rive editor and see exactly how that animation was created, how it was designed. You can inspect it without having to worry about making changes or anything like that. And it'll hopefully give you some inspiration on how to enhance your animations and Rive creations going forward. And that's all we've got. So thanks for tuning in. We really can't wait to see how your projects turn out for this event. Be sure to use the Twitter hashtag puzzle hack. Oh, sorry, what was it, Simon? Flutter puzzle hack to get to show off your Rive animations, to share off your puzzle hack challenge creations. We really can't wait to see it. And you can check us out more again at rive.app and follow us on Twitter.
That's really great, guys. I think we've actually had quite a good number of questions coming out about Rive specifically. I just want to put this up on the screen. This is where people can get that package when they're integrating. I've got a question actually. Is the editor a desktop app, or is that? Sorry, I was just because I remember last time I used it, it was web, and when I hover over the launch button, it just said looking for old Rive. I'm like, hang on a minute, is this old? Am I this new? I was a bit confused for a second.
No, it's still a browser-based editing tool. We did have an announcement that we are looking to come out to port this over to all desktops, and so it's coming soon. It's in the works, but yeah, for now it's just a browser editing tool.
Excellent. And I noticed that you said at the very beginning, I made a note here, IK, I'm assuming you mean inverse kinematics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, yep.
That's sort of like moving the joints for you and solving the kinematics of that joint has to move to make that other point at the end move and all that kind of fun jazz.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so in the dance or the animation for Dash, all I had to do is move that body bone, and the feet are planted to the floor, and I get the legs to bend without having to key all of those. So yeah, it's pretty. I think anybody who's done any basic rigging in Blender or anything would have some knowledge of the IK constraints and things like that.
Right. Let's see. You're muted, Scott. You're muted, Scott. So whatever you've been saying, we've not been here.
That was the last thing I said, actually, was I'm muted.
Oh, okay.
No, IK is basically where you grab the hand and you can, with the cursor, and you can move it around and the arm will follow automatically.
Yeah. Any questions from Scott, Craig, either of you right now? Otherwise, we'll hand it over to the audience questions and we'll start going through them.
Yeah, we've got some good ones from the audience.
Yeah.
All right, let's dig through and see what we got. All right, let's see if we can use this newfangled way of doing this. Do you want to read off the question, Scott?
Okay, you would do that to me right now.
Oh, okay, sorry.
My camera is in the way of the window, so let me move it so I can see. All right. I've worked with CSS and I like how easy it is to make transform by scale and hover effect, etc. for all
HTML.
I'm thinking that's HTML tags, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I want to ask is there any way to define a custom animation?
I mean, that's what you can do with what we saw during the presentation. I think it was asked at the very beginning, you can define your animation in the Rive editor, right, guys?
Right. Yeah.
You can adjust those kind of things like transform and scale.
Yeah. So all of your animations would be set up in Rive as opposed to using the CSS transform and transition properties. So that's where you would solve all of those animation issues.
I suppose the bit he mentions here about hover effect would be done with as usual controller. So you'd have to change the what did you call it? Sorry, the artboard name or whatever it is. So you change like what animation it's playing, so it can go from a non-hovered to a hovered state, and it would perform a new animation.
Exactly. Yeah, you would use you wouldn't change the artboard necessarily, but you could have different animations spread out on a state.
It's like a tag, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then you use these different inputs to define the transitions between animation A and animation B. You could, for different artboards, if you want to display those, you could have different instantiations of the Rive object on your in your Flutter apps, things like that.
Okay. Next question. When will support 3D animation in Flutter?
The daily question.
I'm actually well, go on.
With Rive, I think we do.
There's I guess you can do like, is it like 2.5D, right? So you got the layers, and you can kind of do that kind of.
Yeah, and you can build like there's a few projects some of our designers have worked on of building a character out in Blender and then rendering it out and then bringing it up inside of Rive, but no 3D workspace.
Yeah, just thinking about this, some of the work I've done before, you can also do that thing where if you've got layers, let's say you've got a left and right arm and the character's facing one direction, you can actually move the arms and have them almost look like they're rotating by changing the layer depth, so it kind of like looks like the character's 3D but it's actually 2D. There's some sort of tricks you can do that, right?
Yeah, and especially using the constraints in Rive. So I had kind of briefly talked about that in Dash's face, where you've got a face control, and you're essentially kind of mimicking that 3D aspect. But there's a lot, like there's a few projects in the community, I believe, that have kind of made some pretty convincing pseudo 3D effects.
I mean, I actually did a talk last week about 3D in Flutter Viking, so I suggest the person go watch that about future 3D stuff that is coming on its way. Right, let's move on. Next question. Go for it, Scott.
All right. For the Rive team, can we use Rive for logo animations? That would be really awesome, specifically for landing pages and splash screens.
You can.
Sure seems like a yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on how you rig it. I mean, you're going to have to rig it with some bones in order to deform it, in order to animate it, but sure. I mean, what was that one that they did in Blender years ago? They were able to animate a ketchup bottle. So if you can do that.
One thing I always think about, like where I would use Rive, that like when Discord loads, there's that cute little controller face and it kind of spins and there's a little trailing effect behind it as it spins. If I needed to make something like that in a Flutter app, I would use Rive for sure. And that's the splash screen on, for Discord.
I'll take it one step further and say, you can also use Hero, right? So you could use the Rive widget display, which paints the actual artboard from Rive with a Hero widget, and then you would actually have it transition from the splash into your app, and you can kind of you can extend. You're not like limited to the animations that are in Rive, but you can take your Rive artboard and animate that with Flutter, so you can stretch and deform the entire artboard and do all sorts of other fun things. So lots of options available.
Let's see. Simon?
I have no idea who JC Toon is or what that is. Am I missing something?
Is this a Gen Z thing? I don't know. I don't get it.
JC is one of the character animators at Rive. He's
okay.
Yeah, he does lots. Most of the fun character animations you see on the website were from JC. So I miss him too.
Okay. How do you judge if the animation is going to be too performance heavy for a Flutter app?
Ooh, that's a nice question.
Well,
Craig, do you have any
after
ideas
you
about
stick it in the app, there are performance tools and dev tools, but maybe you can catch it before.
Yeah, any like rules of thumb, heuristics, stuff like that.
I'd say specifically for anything using vectors is obviously going to be a lot more lightweight. So once you start adding raster images, then it's kind of at that point you kind of want to optimize beforehand. But I believe we're looking at some form of optimization. But right now it's kind of like you wouldn't want to bring in a image that's 5 times the size you need it, right? Like you'd want to.
I mean, that's the same with when you're doing app development. When you're saying when you're doing app development, right? You don't bring in, like, if you need an icon that's this big, or a photo that's a thumbnail, you don't bring in like this massive image that's
and
like
downsize it
4K by 4K. Not only do you have to process and downsize and then you have to deal with like bilinear ruling and cubic, you know, whatever it is, like to get the best out of that resize. But then obviously that's a lot of memory and processing time that the phone has to do. So yeah, I guess make sure your assets are appropriately sized for your animation. Craig, before we end, Craig, yeah, there is some dev tools, right? Like I know there was some additions.
Yeah, dev tools are kind of always being iterated on and are a great place to just kind of run it and see, you know, if your app is janking, then that could be a problem. But always remember, if you're testing your app locally and you see some dropped frames, if you're in debug mode, then you're kind of running your app in hard mode in terms of performance. So you want to actually see if your app is performing well, you want to either use release or profile mode.
And there are no extra points for running in hard mode.
Indeed not.
Indeed not. And one other thing, I know that they want to iterate dev tools even faster. That's why they're hiring. So go over to the, what is it? Flutter.dev/jobs.
Yep.
They're looking for help.
Yep.
Let's see what else we have here.
There's Rive support SVG.
Yes.
So someone did mention in the chat you can like import SVG, I think.
Yeah, we in our help docs, you can find that under the resources tab on our site. We mentioned that we support SVG. You can drag and drop that in, and so yeah, you can read more about that on our help docs.
I mean, obviously SVG, the entire SVG standard contains things like JavaScript and things, which is not going to be imported in. So it's a subset, I guess.
Right. Yeah, there are some limitations there as well.
I mean, there is actually, for anyone that doesn't know, there is actually also a package called Flutter_SVG. So if you're just trying to bring SVGs into your app, you can bring them in directly. You don't have to use like a Rive artboard to do that. Obviously, depending on what you're doing, right? But the yeah, as I said, there are limitations. So I'm assuming that when you import that, you convert it from an SVG into a Rive format, right? Does that?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So let's see. Can we control the fadeaway or color gradient flow? If it is possible, could we use Rive logo for logo animations using logo SVG? Not quite sure I follow that one. Is logo SVG a tool, first of all?
Can we control fadeaway or color gradient flow?
Yeah, I think that's the first part to focus on.
Right. So I'm assuming that means like animating gradients.
Yeah, gradients and opacity, maybe. Like, yeah, you can certainly key all of those properties, those properties.
Can you interpolate from one color to another?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So I would think that that's a yes. And then if you apply those to, well, I guess then the last question is, can you do that not just with an image maybe, but with an SVG? I presume that's also a yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I suppose
so I think it's a yes for everything here.
I don't know if you import. I'm sorry, I'm going to throw this over the fence here to Rive guys. If you import an SVG, does it actually import as like one grouped object as an SVG, or does it actually separate out the components?
Believe you can edit, like it's still it brings in the vector data and lets you edit.
Because then, yeah, if you bring in SVG, you could then like key off the individual components and actually animate the individual components.
Yeah, Guido's saying in the chat you can do all of these things.
Ah, Guido's with us.
Yeah, Guido's going to be the anything I don't know.
Speaking of, Guido actually has been helping some of our users and some of our people here. And thank you, Guido, for helping them dry their tears.
This was about
also
the person still being at Rive, right? The animator.
Now there's a follow-up here. I think we've just answered it.
Yep.
Can we animate colors? So
you sure can.
And there was something from Randall a moment ago.
Let's carry on here. Go on, Scott.
Yeah, we've already got that one from.
Is Rive going to support React Native?
Yes, we have a runtime for React Native.
Oh, it's already there. Brilliant. There you go.
Thanks for asking, Cami.
Let's see what else we have.
Yeah, this one's been asked a few times, and it's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is we can definitely push this up, and I'll leave I'll go back in the comments for this live stream and put the link down to that. And we'll also publish the actual Rive file that we used for this presentation, so you can see Dash animated and all the other tile stuff as well.
When we receive that, it will be in the description below for anyone that needs it.
Let's see here. Next. Used Rive files is taking a few milliseconds time to load. What should I do to fix this? Step 1, check if you're in develop or in release mode.
Yeah. I mean, the end of the day, sorry, just talking from a Flutter perspective, I like your guys, obviously the Rive people's opinion, but if you've got a really complex model, it's going to have to load more, and it's going to take a few milliseconds to do so. You should, if you're going to do that in the background, use a future builder or something and present your UI with state, right? So that you can switch from being like the non-loaded to the loaded view. I'm not sure if the Rive widget does that kind of thing for you, or if it's you have to have like the asset loaded and give the data to the Rive widget. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we might have some kind of placeholder, but I haven't played extensively with that yet, so we can double check.
Yeah, just like Simon says, Flutter certainly offers a lot of ways to wrap it in a placeholder and do something. One thing you could do if you knew what your first frame was going to look like, you could have sizing issues with different screens, but if you just had an image of the first frame of your animation, that could fill the spot until your animation is ready, depending on how long those milliseconds are.
I suppose the other side of this is you could actually have it so that your first frame or in your animation is actually faded out. And then your first step of your animation coming in loading is to fade it in. So
yeah, that's exactly.
Instead of having like a hard transition of bam, your animation's loaded and you see like the first frame, you're actually getting it subtly fade in. And I kind of, if that's, honestly, if anything is below, I think it's 350 milliseconds, like it feels super smooth. I think it's when you start getting the 400 millisecond barrier, it feels like something's wrong to the user. So, you've got plenty of room. That's a huge amount of time in computer time. So you're not even going to remotely reach that. If you are, then, I would say, as we said before, run it in release mode. See if it's actually going to take that long.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
How can we draw or place widgets over the keyboard on mobile? I'm going to go with no.
So first of all, you should not be doing that. If you're trying to do that, then do you mean hang on. Let me be clear. This is obviously a general Flutter question. So you have over being in front of, covering the keyboard, or you have over as being above it, like vertically above.
Okay, that would be good.
So just to be clear here, over could mean one of those two things, and obviously. He says draw or place. I think so. I mean, place widgets above the keyboard. You can definitely certainly do that, and that you can do with using like a screen. You can actually do that with scaffold. It actually has a parameter of resize bottom insets or something. You'd set to false, and then you would wrap your body in a safe area. So the body would resize up, but the bottom bar would not, and that would push up. So you can get away and do those kind of things. In fact, you did. Craig, didn't you do like a media query, a couple of videos decoding Flutter or something?
Yeah, so everything Simon just said is correct, and they're kind of the on-rails solutions. Sometimes if your whole page is a stack, then those things won't work so well. And your last resort is to ask the media query what the view insets .bottom value is. And as I say in the video, I always remember view insets is for the keyboard because you have to press keys in. So media query .view insets .bottom, of course. And the amount of pixels that it returns is the height of the software keyboard. So if it's 0, the keyboard's not showing. If it's 300 or something, that's how high you need to position your stuff to be above the keyboard.
So interesting question. Where does resize to avoid bottom padding fall into all this?
Well, that is a property on a scaffold, and it basically will shrink itself. So if your bottom nav bar, for example, will not be covered up by the keyboard, it will slide up with the keyboard, which is it can be what you want, but it's configurable, obviously, since it's a flag you can pass.
And in the past, just to let beginners know, in the past, that's been a little problematic if it starts causing problems like the keyboard overlapping your text
content.
fields.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's very obvious whenever it's quite essentially a simple solution. Whenever you have any input field, make sure it's in a scrollable panel. And that's kind of solves a lot of this problem. So when the keyboard does push up, it does squeeze up the content, but because it scrolls, the input field will always be visible. And that solves a lot of that thing when you're trying to input behind the keyboard by mistake. There's some very subtle things. I just want to mention another one. If you set the edge-to-edge mode, there's System Chrome, and it allows you to make you can draw behind on Android, behind the navigation bar at the bottom and behind the status bar at the top, and that's called edge-to-edge, and that then affects that a little bit more as well. So you start adding complexity the more sort of fancy you want to make things operate with the system, but it's all possible. Just quickly finally answer this question. If you want to draw in front of the keyboard, you're doing something wrong. You should not be covering up the keyboard whatsoever, and you definitely can't do that directly with Flutter, should we say. But it's not something you want to do, so no.
Don't do that.
Next question.
I have lots of ideas, but I'm really bad at drawing. Is being good at drawing recommended or just nice to have with Rive? So in other words, can Rive overcome my shortcomings? Don't everybody jump at once.
I mean, you said about drawing. You can go buy go to Vector Stock and buy some vector graphics. And the interesting thing about vector graphics, they're like layered almost, right? Like they're separate objects. So once you import that into Rive, you can then split them apart and rig them as we just saw, and animate them and do all this kind of fun stuff. And you haven't had to draw a thing, right? That's what I'd say to that. On the other side of it, you can always go Fiverr.com or one of these other websites and have an artist actually draw the thing that you want and give them reference and pay them to give you that time to build it, and then you can take their vectored result or their blender or whatever it is and stick it into Rive, and then you can animate it the way you want.
Right. And we actually do I've worked on a few icon packs and things like that you can pull into your projects and use. So there already are some kind of, in the community, you can find some icons and sticker packs and things like that.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that, because you've got the Rive community where people can see all the other animations and use them and take advantage of things. Yeah. So yeah, you can definitely use Rive without having that. The other side of this is practice, right? Practice. You get better at it. It all depends on what you want to do.
But it's not a substitute for drawing lessons.
Right. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff online they can teach you, right? Like drawing vectors and using. If you have any skills in doing this in one piece of software, so there might not be a direct Rive sort of tutorial. However, if you know and learn, let's say, how to use Illustrator or some one of these other sort of vector editing programs, then you can take that knowledge that you've gained about how vectors work and how you draw things and all the principles, and then you can bring them to Rive. But again, practice with the editor that you're using. It's always takes time.
Right. And we do have a YouTube channel, and there are a good number of tutorials and things like that teach you how to build like a little icon or a widget from beginning to end and how to animate it. So
in fact, I'll grab that off you at the end and we'll put that in the description. So
thinking about implementing the traveling salesman problem. You're masochistic, aren't you? Will our solution be accepted if it is still a slide game, but without all the boxes? That's.
Oh, I think I
Yeah.
think Yusuf is saying he wants less. He wants a smaller slide puzzle so that the traveling salesman problem is solvable.
Because with the more positions you have, is it like a direct n squared or something? I can't remember. N squared.
Exponential, yeah.
It's exponential, is it? So,
yeah.
I don't know. It gets pretty big. I
think that would be fine. I don't think you'd want to go too small.
Yeah, I was going to say, not too small, but I think at the end of the day, it's always about the creativity, right? So it's not necessarily about.
Yeah, sticking to 5x5 is not the the core of the slide puzzle. Good question though. Yeah, We'll confirm this, but I strongly suspect that's a yes. That would be accepted.
Next. How to make a cool intro to my puzzle game. Flutter hack on the dev post requires a video for the submission, ? Now, first of all, if you're going to make a cool intro to your puzzle game, make a cool puzzle game. Then, if you want to know about making videos, YouTube teaches everything. But don't learn anything off Facebook. You can never trust Facebook.
I mean, I was going to say, how to make a cool intro. I mean, you can just, the other side of this is, you could, the video submissions aren't actually that long. So I would just do a voiceover, record your voice. And then you can use FFM. If you don't have the software or licenses to the larger pieces of software that do video editing, you can use FFmpeg and join like a video and audio stream together. You've just done your voice overlay on top of your video. Done.
Yeah, or OBS.
Yeah,
you can just record your screen while you're playing, playing
that's
with your own
what's
game.
real, completely free OBS.
Yeah.
Next. I don't know that much about Rive, but is it possible to create very complex animations, such as the movement effect of the
symbiote in the Venom movie? I can explain the last part if you're confused. Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't think you're going to be creating any movie level special effects in Rive. It's very good though, and I've seen some really cool effects, but it's not. It's not meant for that kind of thing, VFX. I know. I mean, guys, what do you think?
I mean, I guess it depends on how much time you want to invest. I'm sure you could come up with something cool. But yeah, so one thing to note is we do have mesh deforms for raster assets coming at some point, which, maybe that could solve one of those problems. But yeah, I mean, the sky's really the limit, but there are some limitations within.
Rive, you have if you have like a million individual elements in your scene, it's just not. It's going to take forever to edit or render. And there's a point at which it becomes not effective for that kind of usage. So
that's when you go to Blender.
I mean, there's tools out there that the video studios use to do those kind of things, right? So,
folks, Guido's teasing us in the chat. Challenge accepted. We have
challenge
some cool
accepted.
stuff in the works.
That's it. I want to see a million individual scene components. Rendered.
Okay, well, here we go. And you have some stuff in the works, but Guido, this might be the time to have a contest and give away a MacBook Pro. So we can make that our next stream series. Let's see. Where are we in the questions here? When will Rive arrive in the Windows store?
I answered that mistake at the beginning. Soon. Sometime in the future.
Soon.
You made me say that on purpose. Where to get the app template? Well, we have a banner for that, don't we?
Yeah, the puzzle app. Let me go locate that. Make sure it's in the chat as well. And I believe it's here. I believe it's this site. I'm gonna just quickly verify that is the right. Yes, that's the right one. So that link to the actual demo, I will put that in the chat right now for everyone. That links to the demo itself. You can run it and the source code from GitHub. So that's where I suggest people go to, and they can find all the details. Let's see what questions do we have.
Do you have any examples of pixel art animations with Rive? Cassidy, once again, hello.
I do not. Surprisingly, that's the one thing that I've done all my life, and I haven't tried it in Rive yet.
Guido will type in challenge accepted in 3.
Right.
2.
I'm just actually thinking about this because, of course, you've got this kind of notion of see, pixel art animations are frame by frame, right? And I don't know enough about Rive, but I suppose you can, since you can put an object in, you could just do frame by frame, remove and add a different object, and then essentially have frame animation. But I'm not sure if that's an effective way of doing it. I mean, I suppose you could.
In all fairness, go ahead.
You definitely wouldn't want to draw the individual pixels themselves, in the Rive editor, right? It just doesn't make practical sense to draw squares and animate all the squares.
Right.
In all fairness, Guido typed that about something else. I just stole it and put it in there for this.
Yeah, that's
what you say, Guido.
He's
That's
probably sitting there going, "Wait, what?"
No, it's an interesting question. I just thinking about it, Simon, I think you're probably right. You would want to just use Rive to kind of build a carousel to do more conventional sprite things.
But the nice thing about doing, it's kind of a nice mix, right? So you can use your standard. There's several tools out there that do really good pixel animation, and they're editors that are designed for that. Once you have your frames of animation, bring them into the Rive editor, animate them. But then because you've got a surface, you can deform and scale, change the camera, all sorts of other fun things to actually like animate your character with others in a scene. So you could use the pixel art as basically your sprite level or your backgrounds or whatever it might be, and then actually perform the animation in the editor in Rive, I guess.
Right. So, and you could animate position. So for each frame, you could animate the pixel position, which would essentially be animating pixel by, frame by frame, but just repositioning a square. I'm gonna try that now.
Luigi, by the way, says we could totally do pixel animation. Biggest thing we need to add is the option to disable image filtering.
Oh yes, because if you've got bilinear filtering, it's going to get those blurry edges, right? So you want to get rid of that anti-aliasing, have nice crisp pixel edges. Mm-hmm. Okay, what else do we have here? Phantom says
that is raster thread, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Taking an average of 22 milliseconds in a simple curve in the animation builder in Android. DevTools is showing all the methods from the Skia engine.
Well, that is an interesting one because that would not be.
I tell you what, sorry to cut in, Craig, but
no,
my first inclination there is actually it's probably not Rive. So Rive, we know, is more performant than that. I would wrap your Rive just my first go-to would be wrap your Rive widget, whatever you got with Rive in it, in a repaint boundary. Verify that what you're not doing is rebuilding or repainting your entire widget tree, right? You're saying raster thread, but if you invalidate your entire widget tree, you have to re-render that as well as the Rive animation. The other side of it is, I don't know. Probably Luigi would be best person to answer this in the chat, but I don't know if it does culling, right? So if it's out frame, if those vectors aren't being drawn, so you might have something in your scene that's like a huge image or a huge SVG in your scene that's off screen, that's maybe still being rendered by Flutter, which would also slow things down. They're my first two go-tos, and please everyone step in. I don't know.
No, the repaint boundary is very good. I was thinking the same thing. If it's in Skia, then you're past Flutter entirely, so you can also probably skip the whole whoa, don't do it in debug mode check because you're already down to Skia. But repaint boundary off screen, extra animations that aren't being rendered. Actually, that'd be an interesting one for our guests or Guido and Luigi in the chat.
Yeah, I think I mean it'd be. I don't know if they're not doing it. There's something that they could definitely do, and that is trim everything that's not in completely insane. I'm sure they are. So it's probably not that. That's the best guess we can give you, guys. So have fun, debug, work it out. Let us know in the chat comments or whatever.
Any other package to animate each pixel? I don't know about a package, but there is always the class custom painter.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, animate each pixel. Was this related to the pixel art one?
The question came in before we answered, so I think it's an independent question that might be asking the same thing. I've been wondering myself.
I mean, I can't think of reasons why you want to manage. So just the grammar here, don't think they mean like animating individual pixels, because I can't think of any reason why you'd want to do that. But if you do want to animate particles, like this kind of effect of pixels, then you can animate them. And you can do that with Rive. You're just essentially assigning, an individual unit, and you can change its position and so on. It's not a problem.
Fill a stack with 1x1 containers, all animated containers.
No, you use colored boxes because at least they can be constant.
No, but we're gonna animate them. So get out of here.
Yeah, custom painter. If you're gonna do like sort of custom animation stuff, but that's essentially how Rive works, right? So Rive is actually essentially a custom painter. It's painting the canvas. So you can use Rive or you can use whatever other package you want. Next question.
Ooh. Okay.
How to handle list view with expansion tile and list view inside expansion tile children.
I'm going to take some notes on this one.
Sliver list does not work inside expansion tile children, even if parent is okay. So Mr. Craig here did a very good video on putting scroll inside scroll and how this is a very, very bad idea and you should not be doing this. I know what you're doing, and it's actually a shortcoming of the inbuilt. You can do it, but it requires making a custom sliver. Basically, you have one main scroll area, which is your main list view, and then you have expansion tiles inside, and then you have more list content inside that. And when you want to be able to expand and show that content, that is very much a custom sliver and custom behavior, and it's very complicated. It can be done though. Ideally, what's inside your expanded tile is not long scrolling content, so it's not like hundreds of items. So I would just suggest you put a column and just completely get rid of the idea of putting any sort of list view or scrolling content inside.
Oh, right. That's a good point. If you're not scrolling into like another viewport, but actually just content that should move up with all of your content, then yes, absolutely, you switch to a column. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I think that it is. I've actually had this problem before in some stuff that I've been building, and it's where basically there is no sort of sliver expansion tile, right? So you can't put it in line with other slivers and have sliver children. So there's just not part of the framework at the moment. It can be done though. It's just there might be a package for it. I have no idea.
I don't know how much it might help, but I just put a link in the chat that is for the boring show where Ian Hickson, the tech lead on the Flutter team, goes into everything you could want to know about slivers and probably a lot of things that you never wanted to know about slivers.
I'm going to put a big caveat on this. This is a big warning. You probably, if you're new to Flutter, definitely do not want to touch slivers. This is an advanced topic, okay?
No, it will scare you away and you'll go back to JavaScript.
Next question.
Is everyone at Rive good at drawing?
It's in the job description, yeah.
There you go.
I'm kind of curious if which one of Luigi or
Guido.
Oh, what's his brother's name? Oh my god,
Guido.
Sorry, Guido or Luigi. I wonder which one is the best at drawing. They're going to fight out in the chat now.
Before we go on too much more, I just want to make sure I catch anybody before they leave. But I see a lot of DevRel people in the chat today.
Yeah.
If you are not part of the Captains of Community chat, or I'm sorry, Discord, with like hundreds of DevRelers, reach out to me on Twitter. I'll get you in.
What? I'm not in that.
I know I sent you an invite. Are you ignoring my messages again?
All right, moving on. Let's see. The next question: can you use 3D models from Blender or only 2D data like a render? I think we kind of covered that earlier. I'm right in thinking this, and make sure, please correct me, guys, if I'm wrong. But yeah, you can't import 3D models directly. However, you can render out of Blender and include those pieces. So I guess that's what I'd say with that. I suppose you can actually, so in Blender, you can select the layers you want visible in your render. So you can actually just render out segments.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you've got those segments rendered out, crop out the areas as you into smaller images, and then you can then put them all in and rig up your model. And then you can do your animation to simulate. But yeah, it's 2.5D, in other words, right?
It'd be the same process as what we did with Dash. Would just be, although with Blender, you have the, if you're building it, you can, like you were saying, turn on and off layers and render out each piece.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to do that kind of thing.
And if you're going to use Blender and you never used it before, number one, give yourself about a month to learn the interface. Even though they've got a new interface, it's still, but once you know it, it's fantastic.
The Blender interface is very unique, and we'll put there.
Well, but the thing, it was designed to be used with the left hand on the keyboard, the right hand on the mouse. And Tone Rosenthal did a great job with it. But the main thing is, if you're starting with Blender, make sure that you're building your objects on separate layers if you want to do this, because you can end up building it all on one layer and then going, why isn't it working?
Oh, there's some good tutorials on Rive.
Yeah,
Well, I think
we've got a whole resources page full of how to do certain things within the editor, but also within each of our runtime open source libraries. There's usually an examples folder where you can run those examples locally and see how you can use different parts of the APIs and stuff like that.
And there's also the YouTube video, that YouTube channel that we'll link in the description after the stream finishes. What's the best way to set up different animation loops for different states?
I guess I would say, planning out what you want to do. So if it's a character, deciding what animations you want to have, or if it's an icon, what you want the icon to do. And then
can you have multiple states in the state machine? So like, you can have like a looping state that comes back and then it transitions to another individual state.
Yeah, so you can set that up in an animation. So you can have kind of an intro animation that you have control over animating into a looping sequence, and then you can have an outro animation so that you can fine tune that. But you can also use there's the transition timing that you can kind of have it do it for you. But there's some things you need to keep in mind in terms of keying, making sure that all the properties that you want to transition are keyed in each animation. So we've got there are tutorials that go over all of those things.
Just thinking about this, actually, there is actually pitch art classes in Rive. Yeah, exactly. I think there's also this idea that you could, if you want some complex behavior that is not in the state machine in Rive, in the Rive editor, then you could just do that in code, right? You have access to the objects. You can start and stop animations. So if you define your individual animations, there's, you could switch in between them if you have the right, points. So if they're returning back to exactly the same position, for example, you could switch between them in code.
Right. Zach, are you getting dragged off into meeting hell or something?
No, sorry, I just had to take something, care of something really quick, but I'm good.
Okay.
Which all formats does Rive support as of the latest version? Does that mean like import formats? I don't know.
For assets, we support, I believe, SVG, PNG. We've got some other ones coming down the line.
Yeah. Right now, I believe it's JPEG, SVG, and PNG. Yeah.
I think, tell you what, from my experience, I actually looked at this recently. I was trying to make an animated PNG, and in the end, I ended up doing one of the new formats because WebP, animated WebP, I think it was, because that's supported by Flutter. So they've already got a decoder in it. So just throwing that out there. If you want new formats, look at WebP. There's also the H2, was it H26? No, HEIV. There's a few other new image formats actually that are highly compressed. Can I make motion graphic videos with Rive?
You absolutely can. Anything you can animate, you can render out as a video file. So yeah, I actually did a small little sequence in Rive. One thing to note is that text isn't there yet, but it's coming. So I think that's going to make things like title sequences and intro animations something that I will probably use Rive for almost exclusively for doing things like that.
So actually from the Rive editor, you can actually export video.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a cloud renderer that you can, right now you can export PNG sequences, MP4 files, and I think was mentioned in the chat, Gifs have been added as well. So I'm gonna throw this out there right now to other people.
Try not to use GIF. Even GIFs on Twitter and GIFs and all these other websites, they're not actually GIFs, they're MP4 files. Mm-hmm. You would be insane to really use GIF because it has a limited palette, 256 colors only. So Yeah, and it's definitely not compressible. So you're going to get these massive files if you use actually true animated GIFs. So try to avoid them. They're not. Yeah. You don't want to make your app 50 meg because you include like an animated GIF in it. Right? It's just not practical. All right, another question. Do you want to do this one, Scott?
Well, I've got good news and bad news. Desktop development with C++ is required to build for a Windows application. Can we have it without installing Visual Studio? Can we use Visual Studio for Flutter? A, yes, you can use Visual Studio for Flutter. B, Visual Studio is probably not going to help you with releasing to Windows because if I remember correctly, I'm sorry, it's Visual's VS Code is what people use for Flutter.
Yeah.
Actually, yes. And
you do actually need Visual Studio. There is a community edition that's free. And you do actually need the Microsoft tooling. You do, as far as I know, the guidance is, and I'm probably wrong here, but you can try it out yourself. The guidance is that you need to install VS Code because VS Code comes with all of the tooling that's required, like the compiler and all these other things. And you can theoretically, at least on Windows, install the compiler toolchain, the Windows SDK, and other things without VS Code as the front end. And when you choose your installer for VS Code, it actually asks you can do like an advanced mode and choose your components, and you can say don't include VS Code. But to be honest, if you're going to compile on Windows and you're going to use those compilers, well, you might as well include it. So in short, no, you are going to have to use it. I mean, at the end of the day, you could compile that C++ code with GCC or another compiler, but that's on you. It's not officially supported. So that's why I put that. I mean, Craig, have you got anything to add to that?
I'm pretty ignorant of Windows development myself. I believe one of the sentences that I've heard is you need to have Windows to develop Windows apps, just like you have to have Mac OS to develop Mac apps. But that's the extent of what I know about Windows.
I actually do know. I'm gonna correct you on that. This is not correct.
Oh, great. No, thank you.
But
Please.
you can actually build Windows apps on Linux and actually test them and run them on Linux.
No, that's good to know. Thank you.
When I say that, just Windows apps in general. When it comes,
and
to
I do want to clarify that you cannot legally build Mac apps on anywhere.
Mac has to be done on Mac, but yeah, you can build Windows apps and Linux apps on either or platform or Mac. You can build Linux apps and Windows apps on Mac as well, but you'll be running them with an emulator. Yeah, it's all possible. Again, you won't be running VS Code though on Linux. So VS, not VS Code, Visual Studio Full on Linux.
Okay. I have been doing Android using Kotlin for about a decade, but new to Flutter. What is basically the minimum expected in the submission to pass level 1 criteria? First, if you've been doing Kotlin for a decade, that's really awesome. You should probably talk to Hadi or Riri though. Second, in all honesty, to pass level 1 criteria, I can think of mainly one thing, and that is that it's solvable. Apparently not all of them are. So you might want to, yes, there we go. So that could be really interesting. And I've got a couple thoughts about how to make sure they're solvable, but I will leave that alone.
Yeah, I mean, we have the demonstration code that is available on the link that we've put in the chat. That is your basic starting point. Anything you do on top of that, that's a submission. That's a completely valid submission. The point here is how good you make it, or how many alterations you make, and how creative you are. That's gonna bump you up, and with the voting board, as it were. Like the judges. So make it cool, make it good, and do your best. That's all.
Make it yours.
Make it yours. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there plans to hire an artist on the Rive website?
That was confirmed in the chat as coming soon.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah.
Are there any third-party integration with Rive, like After Effects?
That's a good question. Or is After Effects just like a total competitor? Like would never integrate with them? How does Rive think about all that?
Of course, Adobe could try to buy you out, and then all you guys could just go,
well, Guido's in the
sip
chat. I'm
mimosas
sure he's
for
I'm
breakfast.
sure Guido can answer that one. But,
I would say that in terms of competition, like I think Rive, what we're wanting to do is create a interactive animation tool. So I think that's the big distinction you could make from those two. I mean,
the other thing is, like After Effects and some of the other ones, they're driven to VFX, right? They're driven to that kind of like timeline, video import, add things. It's not necessarily like animation as their primary. It's video as their primary, I'd say. So, but I kind of like the idea though that there might be a plugin for After Effects that says import Rive animation, right? That allows to bring a Rive animation on top of video and to really like integrate the two, and it only adds a bonus in terms of more people using Rive to produce animations for other tooling and other things.
Alrighty.
Next question.
Need a little bit more explanation about the delegate pattern that was used for the sample app. We really should have the guys from VGV back for that one.
I mean, I don't know specifically in the code. I'd have to go have a look, but the delegate panel itself is normally about delegation, right? The idea is that you define a function or a piece of executable code, and you're essentially saying use this for something that happens in the future. So normally these are callbacks and other things. So when, let's say, you complete the puzzle, it runs a delegate that completes, and then that can then start a Rive animation to make some celebratory animations happen, for example. These are all things that you can do with that kind of pattern. I would suggest there are some books online about programming patterns, and you'll find a lot more about the delegate patterns specifically in those. There is a book, an original book called Gang of Four. It's called the Gang of Four book. It's for professors that wrote for computer scientists and professors that wrote design patterns, computing design patterns, I think it's called. But it's pretty old, and there's newer versions available. So I'd go for I think there's design patterns for dummies or something like that, which would put you in the right direction if you're curious about programming design patterns in general.
So I forgot I was muted there for a moment. I had an alarm going off in the back. There's also Head Start design patterns, which is really good. And also I will look up a YouTube link for Christopher Akravi, who did an awesome series of design pattern videos, which means you have to read the next
that's right.
question there, Simon.
Why provider is state management? Okay, we're not going to go into state management in general because it's a topic we cover like literally every video. However, the point here is the term state management is actually used to mean multiple things in Flutter, and one of them is architecture and the movement of data within your app and a few other things. It's a melding of multiple topics. Why is it state management? Because it helps you manage your state of your application, making it state management. It's that simple, really. I don't think there's much more to be said about it. Yep. Craig, what to add?
No, I mean, that's one of the deepest rabbit holes in front-end development, Flutter, React, or otherwise. So it's that was a good cursory glance at it.
Yeah, kind of deflection there. But one sec here. I'm trying to remember, where did we put Rubens?
No, come on, let's move on. Right.
All right.
Right. Next question. If I want to make the element of my puzzle each piece like the ones in the official video of the challenge or like the ones in the background of the live, what would you recommend? Oh, actually making them like almost feel like the background here, like 3-dimensional or more. You could definitely, it's only 2 boxes, right? It's two. You could definitely make one of those in Blender, and then color them and export them into different shapes, as we were saying earlier, and then use those images as your tile backgrounds. That'd be one way to do it. And if you're very clever at the way that you scale it, you can actually clip outside the borders so they look like they slot in and clip in for sliding.
Yeah, if you were, and then you've got a potential like perspective change as they go from the left to the right half of your puzzle. And if you were able to achieve that with some kind of clever clipping potentially from an exported asset, like I think that would be impressive.
I mean, I have to say, I'm totally forgetting. I mean, you can also just draw these in, these are vector editor, Rive. You can just draw them in there and export the graphics from there. That's the other possibility there. Right.
One thing to note about, so we've talked about raster assets. You can do some pretty convincing, pseudo 3D with gradients and things like that right inside of Rive. So.
And for a drop shadow, just in Flutter, look at the physical box widget, which every time I see that on the widget of the week playlist, I'm like, what the hell are you again? Oh, right.
If
shadows.
Yeah, if you're kind of curious, the material widget itself, underneath the material widget it's built with a physical shape box or whatever it is that creator said. So
physical something,
yeah, physical shape. I think it is. I can't remember.
I have an interesting question that's just from me, and it just was inspired here. Let's say someone wants to do a puzzle, and each piece of their puzzle is part of a picture we know, right, which can be shuffled around. But what if instead of a picture, we actually used an animation from Rive that was looping?
Ooh.
Cutting it into individual pieces so you can shuffle it around.
I mean, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do a transform in Flutter. At least you could, if you had one Rive animation, right, that had something happening on it.
Yeah. How do you cut it up?
Yeah. Well, the trick here is that's the problem that people have in their head. When you see these things from a game, you go, oh, they cut it up. No, they didn't. They actually have the same thing multiple times over. And what they're doing is they're doing a transform translate, which moves almost the camera, if you will, to a certain position. So you're essentially moving the Rive animation off negative, and then you add a clip which cuts out. And so you do this in Flutter. This is not in Rive, and you end up with a portion of the Rive. You would have to put a size box around your Rive content, but you have a portion of it visible on your tile then, and then you were to do that 10 times over and whatever it is, 20 times for all the cells, and you would end up with a different segment of the original Rive animation. However, you are playing the same Rive animation 20 times over.
That's whereas it might be better to make one animation and make it a constant and then just reuse it.
There's some other tricks you can do, but
it would still need to be rendered and evaluated a bunch of times.
You still render it. I'm just thinking that I mean, like, the end of the day is you are animating it. There are tricks in sorting that out, but none of them are easy. None of them are easy. I'd say, just try doing it the way I said, simplify it. And once you run it in release mode, it's quite performant. I mean, you'd be surprised what you can do with Flutter, when it comes down to it. Like, all these animations that Rive renderer, or the visualizer in Flutter is actually doing is a lot. There's a lot going on there, and it's been heavily optimized, but there's a lot happening with moving all these vectors around and changing shades and alphas and all this kind of fun stuff. So you'd be surprised we can get away with.
It's an interesting problem.
Next question.
Can we include features outside of the tile puzzle, like a menu, difficulty settings, leaderboard? Of course.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know the exact criteria that the judges will use. I've actually signed up to be one myself, but I don't know what I'll be told, specifically to evaluate.
They don't even tell team members what's going on. Okay, it's not just me.
I probably could know, but I don't yet. So take this answer with a grain of salt. I would guess difficulty settings and leaderboards, because they do relate to the challenge, would definitely count. Once you get into like menus, I mean, that could be a way to toggle that difficulty setting, but I don't know that menus would kind of continue to enhance the submission. So kind of the further you get from enhancing the core slide challenge itself, I would expect and I don't know what the criteria will be yet, but I expect that would have diminishing returns.
You could also be really mean to your users and put a slide puzzle over a slide puzzle, maybe one of them in the app bar, and you have to complete the one in the app bar before you can use the menu.
What about like a fractal slide puzzle where you complete one and it zooms out, and that slide puzzle is a square in another slide puzzle? Yeah.
Oh,
and it just goes forever.
Or like you do one, you think you're done, and then it zooms out and it turns out it's a Rubik's Cube. You have to do all the pieces.
You could actually, you know what? You could actually do that, like one slide puzzle on each side of a cube. You know, they can do that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah,
there's definitely
getting twisted.
Fun, right? Fun. Complete the sides.
You know, when you say fun, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Next question.
I tried to display a material banner in a scaffold. Okay, this sounds like something failed. Implementing a custom scroll view with a sliver app bar. The banner is displayed above the app bar instead of below.
So what's happening there is it's the scaffold that controls the display and position of a material banner. See in a minute, Scott. So the scaffold is actually controlling the material, the display of the material banner, and because you're using a sliver app bar, not the app bar and scaffold, it's the sliver app bar is actually the content. So the best way I say about this is display your material. You basically have to make a little widget that displays your material banner in the top of your custom scroll view. So you can just do that with a sliver to box adapter. So the very first sliver in your custom scroll view. In fact, even better than this, you can actually do it in the sliver app bar itself. You can probably do it below, so it still pins to the top of the screen. There's a bunch of different effects you can do, but yeah, there's no inbuilt mechanism. It's because the material banner is meant for the material, essentially the scaffold, which is part of material. But you can just display your own banners. You know, there's no reason why you can't do any sort of widget animation or anything else you want to do with sliver app bar custom scroll view themselves. But it's an interesting one actually, because you know that's picked up. You know, I kind of feel like maybe sliver app bar should be extended to support that kind of thing. You know, Craig can take that back to the team.
Yeah, great. Well, anyone can take it back to the team by way
Raise
of
initiative
a feature request on GitHub.
The other side is if you come up with a great solution, do a PR. We get update your local copy of the SDK. Do a PR for that to the repo, and you might find that your code makes its way into the Flutter code base, and someone accepts it, asks for some changes, some tests, and before you know it, your widget is in the framework. In fact, that's what happened to Scott. So Scott worked on a widget called Spacer, and now that's used in most apps.
That's from Scott?
Yep.
And to be fair about that one, though, I made it. I didn't think it was very much to it. I just did it because I was feeling lazy. And there was this guy named Randall Schwartz who jumped up and down and said, you need to submit that. You need to submit that. So, yeah, I think he's creeping around here somewhere.
So, yeah, I mean, again, if you guys think that there's a widget that is something that every app would probably use, or it's a bug, or there's some other feature improvement, the team can't do everything. There's only a limited number of people, and there's so many more developers out there than there are team members. Try it yourself. If you're going to fix it yourself for your own app, fix it in a way that it can be put into the framework and submit a PR or an issue ticket, and then solve that issue ticket with a PR, and you'll get the team looking at it,
Yeah.
Right.
And then you can put it in your resume that you are a contributor to the Flutter framework.
Correct. And you actually
doesn't hurt.
There's an authors file in the repo, and your name will be added to that. Hashish Kumar says, by the way, is there any community icon animation assets collection? I guess there is, right?
Yeah, there are a few projects in the community. I believe I need to see if we have a hashtag or a label for them. But I think if you just search in the community for community icons or things like that, you'll come across a few that the team members have built.
I mean, if they've got a hashtag, you'll see them on all of them, right? I mean, it'd be pretty obvious to find out what the hashtag is if they need to find it. If you find that, Michael, put it in the YouTube chat and people can find it. All right, next one. Gmine says, is it normal that there are direct connections from the desktop to database in the case of Flutter desktop in the connection between desktop and SQL Server? Okay, it is not normal to do that. So the problem here is about the security. So you can do this, and in fact, it's very much the way of 90s desktop apps, right? A lot of apps in the 90s would have like offices would have like a Microsoft Excel server or whatever, and use Access databases and also Access server and have Access database and all sorts of other fun things. This is not done currently because of the security consequence. This means that you're shipping your SQL Server credentials inside your desktop app, and you need to heavily restrict those so they can only read from certain tables, certain columns, write to certain tables, certain columns, and it's bound to go wrong. So what you want to do is remove that restriction, push that the restriction behind that, the security, to the server. And what you do is you just put a thin layer, an API, in front of your database, and that is so that your database is accessible through that API, and from that API, accessible to the app. And by adding that extra hop in between, you can store like private data in your database and fields and columns that should not be seen by the user, and all sorts of other transitional tables and all sorts of other things that are not accessible to the app. And the app has a rigorous pattern of data that it uses. Like this is the exact data model it uses and describes from JSON, or deserializes from JSON. Sorry, and then that connection to the server is HTTP, or choose your preference, whatever connection you want. But that doesn't mean you can't do things like, you can do some other valid things on desktop, like you can use WebSockets with, you're not on web, but WebSockets are in Flutter. So you can actually use like push data down to an app and all sorts of other fun things. So yeah, if this is the easiest way to get your app going, do it, right? Like prove your idea works and then add the API in there for security. But yeah, certainly not. I would not recommend releasing an app with a direct connection to a database.
Well, one thing,
what you do with SQL.
Yeah, I share that alarm. And one thing I would say in terms of like doing that first is you'll likely, Simon mentioned that the API should return JSON, that the front end deserializes, and that's its kind of distinct data model. If you're hitting your database directly, you're going to have, you're just going to get like the raw rows returned from your query connection, functionally a CSV, right? And then if you're like, okay, cool, this works, now it's time to make it secure. And for realsies, not only will you still have to build that app in the middle, but you'll then need to refactor your entire front end so that it uses this new data connection and gets all of its data from JSON instead of the raw query connection. And that's going to be a lot.
Yeah. I will actually mention just a little bit on this topic since we're here quickly, and that is it's one of those things that a lot of app developers don't do. They don't have a view model and a domain model, right? So what I mean by that is your views on your app, or what your app shows on the screen, has a certain set of classes, data classes that represent the data that you show on a tile on the screen, or an idea or an item. That does not have to be the same data model that you're using or communication model with your server. Right? These can be two separate models, and it means that you have a separation of concern. It means that you can build on your UI, mock your UI with mock data, all sorts of other fun things, without even talking about server or how you get the data. They're two separate concerns. You can do one and then the other. This also means that, as Craig was just mentioning there, if the data coming back to the server is pretty much CSV, you've got to do a lot of processing to get into a model that you can represent. That's all done it should all be done in isolation, even if you have an API in the back end of your application, and then it serves the content to the front end layer in a way that it can understand. That's the view model, right? So you have a separation of those two layers. You don't sprinkle SQL throughout your UI, right? Throughout your front end layers, because when you want to move away from it or change it, you have to essentially break all your widgets and all your app.
Yeah, you would in practice basically start over in your Flutter app.
Right. So yeah, it's always definitely always good to separate concerns. All right. Next question.
Also, make sure to get the Rive questions in. They are still here. Oh, here's one. Great.
Get your questions in now. Rive or otherwise, but definitely Rive first. I think the guys. It's been there a while now. So thank you for sticking around, guys. You don't have to stick around if you don't need to go. So, right. What else do we have here? What's on the Rive roadmap? Any cool new features to AR Rive in the near future?
To AR Rive, funny. We do have, like I mentioned, text coming at some point. Mesh deformations. There's a lot of things. I don't know what I can actually.
I tell you what, we're going to defer this to Guido, who's in the chat, who wants to answer all your questions.
Yeah.
Next time, Guido can come on the show, and then he can answer on these ones. Right, what else do we have here? Cassidy Williams says, "What's your favorite thing in Rive that you wish more people knew about, specifically Zach and Guido?"
I wonder if she meant Zach and Michael.
I think she meant Zach and Michael, but yeah.
Okay.
What's your favorite features in the Rive editor?
I think probably the thing I really like about Rive, and I wish people knew more about, is the interaction between the designer and the developer. So, if you got someone designing these assets in Rive, and you got someone coding it into some kind of runtime application, there's not a lot of this need to do a lot of like back and forth as far as like, oh, I need to redo this thing in Rive. Can you just try it out again in code? There's very minimal like code changes needed when, if some kind of part of the Rive animation needed to be updated, a fill changed. Really all the designer does is, make those changes, get a new file, plop that into the new app. And really most of the time you probably don't even need any code changes. And so it makes for a really seamless, like kind of transition handoff between design and development.
I mean, just looking at just on that point, I looked earlier and saw that you can actually put URLs. You can do like riveanimation.network, right? So you can
exactly.
The designer can just upload it to whatever the thing is, and then the developer just refreshes their app or hot restarts, and then bam, they're downloading the new asset.
Right. It. Yeah, you could definitely just drop that in like an S3 bucket. We have a constructor for riveanimation.network, like you said, to just pull it in easily, and you wouldn't even need to change the file name or anything like that.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think to follow up on that, like for what got me interested in Rive to start with was the state machine, the interactivity. That's something that I haven't ever experienced with an animation software before. So that was kind of the aha moment where I'm like, oh, this is pretty neat. This is pretty unique. So being able to build those interactions right in the editor and kind of build some logic into your animations and interactive projects is really powerful. So that would be my favorite thing, and what I think people should play around with for sure.
Okay, next question.
There's going to be support for a new native animated splash screen in Android 12.
It's there. It has the plugin has been updated to support. In fact, it warns you right now that if your app is using the old mechanism for launching from a splash screen, that you need to update your Android code to support the new one.
Cool.
There is actually a page on the Flutter.dev website specifically for splash screens, and it has a whole section on Android 12 and how to update your app for Android 12. There's a migration guide on there.
Very cool. Okay, somebody saw an app called Flutter VR. Is that Flutter and Daydream? First, if you know a way to still run Daydream, then I want to know about it, because I had spent a lot of money on it, and when they updated Android and killed off Daydream after everybody had spent all this money for for Daydream apps, I was rather upset.
I will mention though that there is, the Daydream headset can still be used with a Flutter app, so you can do still stereoscopic vision. So you can actually, if you had, and I'm going to just suggest this with Rive, if you're talking about Rive, imagine a stereoscopic Flutter puzzle, right? So you could actually put two Flutter puzzles on your UI in landscape, right? One for each eye. And if you put that phone in the Daydream headset, you will get, and if you move them slightly apart or offset, you will see a stereoscopic view of your puzzle. And if you tweak things right, or use the right transformations on your angling, you could actually get that kind of moving from one. When you slide a puzzle piece, it will actually move from one eye to the other and do that kind of like 3D effect. So
all the DevRel people from Rive and from the Flutter team now need to reach out and find out where the old Daydream people hid all those Google Cardboards. They stopped doing them.
Slap a Flutter stick on the side and start.
There's got to be there's a room full of them somewhere.
It's a good idea.
I do wonder, actually. There's an interesting sort of. I'm not sure if it's niche, but there's an interesting thing there. If you could do like 2 cameras or something in Rive and actually produce a stereoscopic output, that might be an interesting idea, because you're just doing sort of two renders side by side.
Okay, and I happen to have heard that. Oh, Cassidy, where did you find it? Anyway, I happen to have heard that apparently there's a meeting at Rive here very shortly, so we have one more question for them.
Okay.
Is there an asset store yet?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'll say not yet.
Not yet.
Yep.
All right, let's. I think we'll continue here for a few more minutes with general Flutter questions, and I think the Rive guys have to head off to important meetings. So thank you for joining us, guys. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
Time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for making Dash dance.
Yeah. And I'll send me the links and I'll get them in the description once we're done.
Perfect.
Yeah, I need to run as well, folks, but this has been great.
All right. See you next time.
Yep. See you, everybody.
See you guys. Well,
Just
Simon,
us.
alone at last.
Just us, frogs in the pond. Right. In fact, do you know what? Do we have a
In the
Randall?
cooking pot.
Do we have a Randall that wants to join us on the stream? Randall!
Hey.
Thank you for managing the questions behind the scenes there. It's been really helpful.
It's so much easier the new way we're doing it. It's just been it's been a blast. It's actually
The
trivial
questions
almost.
so much easier.
Yeah.
So we have
fewer windows open.
We actually have a few more questions, so let's get through them. And if you have any more Flutter questions, put them in the chat. Get a queue in front of them, and we'll
I'll
be finishing
grab
up
it
soon. So go get your questions in. Otherwise, you'll have to wait a whole week for the next stream.
Oh man, a whole week.
A whole week. That's an eternity in dev time.
Page grid on Rive Artboard. I think that question just missed.
Just missed them. Can we have a page? But I do actually. Can you have a page grid? I mean, I don't see a reason why you couldn't put a grid on an artboard. You can draw lines or draw squares and stretch them really thin and make a grid. Or you can even size your content into a grid of items and put them on a Rive artboard. That's what I'd say to that.
And I put that up there for a reason. Danielle, I hope you're feeling much better.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Aww.
I hope you're feeling so much better, Danielle. Danielle was in hospital recently. I hope she's getting over her illness.
So let's see here. What was your happiest moment when developing Flutter?
First paycheck.
That too. For me, it had to be the day that Simon stopped saying, "What the hell are you doing?" And he looked at me and said, "You're not wrong, but."
You're more right than before, in other words. I was going to say, the thing for me, I think is the happiest moment. I don't know if I could say this happiest moment because there's so many good moments. I couldn't gauge them. I would say, though, that there was a very moment of delight. And the delight factor was I was coming from Android, and that just the issue with just like compiling and just the whole pipeline of development was just so slow and sluggish. It drove me insane. And then that very first hot reload, right? When you make the change to the UI and hit save, and suddenly it's changed. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh,
I want that. That's brilliant. I need more of this. And there's that kind of click moment. And there's been a few click moments. Like, I think the other one was I do remember one of the very first my very first Flutter mess around apps, right, was I just put an icon on the screen, a material icon, and I just wanted to drag it around the screen. So how do I do that with, what would you call it? Declarative UI. And that, again, once I had that working with like the gesture detector and, updating the position and then changing the widget position, I was like, this is really easy. This is really amazing. And this is just done with a few lines of code. And there's a couple of things like that when I've done quite amazingly complex behavior in the UI in just a few lines of code. I'm like, what, 100 lines or 200 lines? I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like,
Yep.
This would have taken me thousands of lines of code to do in Android.
Wow.
So that's what I'd say from that perspective.
People
there is the other one too. Simon and I were at DroidCon London at one point, and it was rather amusing. He had put together a sample based on where did you find that again? Was it Dribble or Up Labs or?
Yeah, I know. I think I know. You mean the rotation one?
Yes.
Yeah, that was actually on Google. No, what's it called? Not Google Plus, whatever it's called back then.
Yeah. Yes. Google Plus.
Google Wave, Google Plus. I can't remember. One of those.
Wave was
Google
before Plus. Yeah.
I don't know. It was around that time. Someone had posted like this animation, a designer, which was when it rotated, it animated all the widgets around so that they stayed in view and it kind of aspect ratioed them. And so we built that. And is that what you're talking about?
Yep. And that would be basically as you move it in your hand, it always stayed facing up. And actually, I'm looking around. I had posted.
I have it if you want it.
You talk about the video that we put on Twitter?
Yeah, if you want me to, I can share it right now.
Yeah, go for it. I'm looking for it because the funny thing about it is we're sitting there working the Flutter London booth at DroidCon London, and there's a whole crew of us there. And the talks let out. Now you got everybody walking by, and I'm holding this thing up in the air, and I'm just rotating it. And it's always staying face up like this right here. And the number of people who just stopped with one foot in front of the other, just mid-step, and their jaws hit the floor was unbelievable. That app right there doing that got more people to come over to the Flutter London table, I think, than anything else.
It's super simple as well.
Yeah.
It's super simple. I can put a link to the code in the chat in a minute.
Yeah. Actually, I tried to run the code recently. I think it might need updated.
It probably does. It's not been touched for quite a few years, so
it may not even be null safe. So there's a challenge.
I don't think it is null safe at all. No. If anyone wants, there's no PRs. So if anyone wants to do a PR and push it, there's the link and go right ahead. So if you can get it working, PR it. Not to see it. Anyway.
Speaking of PRs.
Okay, hang on. I've lost track of what questions we've come through now. Hang on.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. I'll take care of that. The default counter app. Now, number one, there is the skeleton template. Okay, which is a bit better. It does not include GoRooter because GoRooter is very, very new from Chris Sells.
I also say,
but you can make one.
Yeah, I was also going to say that you can go make yourself a template, right? Like use that starting point, have a separate repo. I don't think that you ever see GoRouter added to the template, the skeleton template, and it's almost like a conflict of interest. There's no problem with this. It's just the fact that because Chris Sells is on the Flutter team and he made GoRouter, it'd be pretty irrespective of them to just say, oh, here's the skeleton app, here's GoRouter, right? And I can never see that happening. And I would not want that to happen because I think that people should be given the option to choose whatever they want. And that's what I'd say about that. Just go look around, find the right router package that's good for you.
Okay, I'm going to mute Simon on this one.
Yeah.
Just go watch the stream from 2 weeks ago, or was it last week?
I
think it might have been. Yeah.
Okay,
no, it was your talk last week.
Yeah. My talk is on this YouTube channel in the Vikings Day one. I will mention this. I don't have a game programming background. I think just been in programming so long and attempted to write several games myself. These are all, I think I did like I've done like the old Tetris, chess, Hangman, I don't know, all sorts of other like little things. And I've attempted to make some 3D games that have never gone anywhere. But no, I've never been part of any sort of big game production or what do you call them?
Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to start wrapping up here. So we'll answer the last few questions that we've got. That one, unfortunately, I think you just missed because unless you know somebody at Rive
There
who's
must
doing
be
it.
someone working on a game in Rive. Where's the game at? I mean, there is several people actually. Was it Blacklight Studios? I can't remember the couple. They've been making games, right? They actually did some animations for Rive. They've been making games when it was Flare, in fact, way back in the day. And they've been making games with Flutter using Rive as like, the animation studio. And you can definitely do that to make games.
Okay, let's see here. Does Flutter support Instant App?
Yes and no. So you can. There is an app. There is actually, if you go to the Flutter.dev website, there is a section on app clips for iOS. I've actually got. Here's the thing, right? I've actually got Flutter apps working on a watch, right? Like an Android watch. You can do that. It works no problem. And I don't see any reason why you couldn't do with Instant App, right? But you're kind of looking then add to app. It's not. I don't think it's a directly featured support. The Instant App limitation, I think, has been raised to 10 megabytes. It was originally 4, which was too limiting for Flutter because the runtime is 4. You would be hard pressed to get practical usage inside. I think it's 10 or 12 meg limit of Instant Apps. However, it depends on what you're doing. I don't see any reason why you can't do it. There's no, as far as I know, there's no specific reason why you couldn't do it. Here we go. The experimental preview exceeds 10 megabyte uncompressed IP payload size and can't be used in production. There's actually a whole section on the Flutter website, and that's what you want to look at for iOS app clips.
Well, share.
It's in the chat. It's in the chat.
Okay. This is another one. I'm wondering if it's, well, number one, I believe it's not possible. Number two, if it was possible, would this be a Jurassic Park where so worried about the fact that you could that maybe you need to think about if you should? And that is it possible to have more than one UI thread in Flutter?
Well,
I mean, even if you could, should you?
Yeah, no, but the question is, why would you want more than one UI thread? Yeah. Right? Is it because you're currently blocking your UI thread because you're doing other things, and then you want a different background thread to do that work? Right? Like, it's about how you're approaching this. What I will mention is that the way that the system works, it's not designed currently. It's halfway there in terms of doing multiple threads for building and rendering UI, where there is separate threads in the engine for like building, rendering pixels, and doing all the separate tasks. So you get the ability to multi-thread, and islets give you background threading. So you're fully capable. You should not need to have multiple UI threads. Yeah, that's what I'd say to that. I just found that company that I was talking about. It's called Black Hive Media. I've put a link to their Twitter profile, and it was Mandy Lowry. It's a while ago that I remember chatting to Mandy. So it looks like they've got some really cool games on the way, running on Xbox and all sorts. So go check them out. That's pretty cool.
Okay. Let's see here. We got one more. 2D shooter game using decorator pattern for score. Is it a good practice using a decorator pattern for a single variable?
I mean, I'm not seeing the use case of a decorator pattern, so maybe I'm misremembering the decorator pattern.
Yeah, well, and it's, I mean, wouldn't it be typical Flutter to use the composite pattern to put that variable in and then the observer pattern to update it?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think let me just I just tricked it out. It was what I thought it was. It's where you have you can
The add-on pattern. Christmas
the
tree.
add-on pattern. Implement an interface, extend a decorated component, add additional functionality. I mean, Amy, the decorate pattern, yeah, that's just a standard. It's what we do in Flutter anyway. It's no, that's something else. Hang on a minute.
In the meantime, while Simon tries to figure this out,
you've got standard abstraction and hierarchy, right? Hang on, the words escape me. Come Randall, you know this one. You got inheritance, composition. Sorry, now I'm thinking it was composition. No, it's not the composition pattern. So, yeah, no. If you're using the decorate, it's the way it is. Sorry. Just want to be clear. This is the decorate pattern. And yes, if you create an interface and have one concrete implementation of that interface, that is bad, right? Like I consider that bad because there's just no practical use of that. And when you're trying to understand this, let's say call stack, let's say crash happens, and you're going back through your code, you get to an interface and that's it. You stop. You have maybe no idea about how that interface is implemented in a concrete class. You have to go examine each concrete implementation or something like that. Mm-hmm. So in my eyes, the only reason to have an interface is when you actually need to separate your two implementations, basically, and have multiple implementations of something. There's just don't do it otherwise. It's just, and another point to mention is Dart. Every class can be implemented. That means every class can be interpreted as an interface. So there's literally no reason. If you have one class and you want to override a particular behavior, you just go, this other class implements this other class, and that's it. You now implement all the methods, and you've now got new implementation of the other class.
We do all the same stuff, but in different ways. And a lot of times we just take it for granted because we're already doing it, but we don't even think about it. All right. A clarification here, and then I wanted to let Randall touch on something that he brought up earlier about only half the puzzles being solvable. But just to finish this one, the multiple UI threads actually has an interesting point, because what if you've got a heavy animation, an expensive animation, running it on something else?
Okay. I want to be clear. You have a UI thread and you have a render thread, right? The UI thread itself, even with a heavy animation, is not normally doing much, right? Like it's all about how you build up your animation. Once you have a segment of UI, that's cached, that's a display list, and then when you go to re-render, it's the rendering time it takes to render everything, right, for a frame. You'd be hard pressed to reach those limits. I mean, you'd be surprised. But yes, in short, the reason why set state takes a function is to ensure that state changes happen within a scope, so that you can do multi-threading, you can do this stuff possibly in the future. But yeah, I don't see any reason why you would need to have. You could build up your objects for your animation or your game or whatever on a separate thread and a separate isolate, and then you're just rendering those on your UI thread. There's all sorts of ways of doing this kind of fun stuff.
Okay, and one other thing that brings up two very important points. One of them I've really been kind of a thing I've been bringing up lately. Can you please consider adding support for creating smartwatch apps with Flutter without the need for native code? Well, number one, and the one that I really want to bring up, not a single person on this screen works for Google.
Yeah.
We do not work for Google. We are not on the Flutter team. Please don't make the mistake of thinking we are. They send us cool stuff. And, if we're lucky, they answer our emails and maybe come and visit every once in a while the way that Craig did today. But we do not work for Google. Please don't think that, and don't say that, because then they get mad if we're pretending to be Googlers. The second part, can I please consider adding the support? Well, Flutter is an open source framework. The bigger question is, can you consider adding the support and put in a PR?
Right. Well, it's already there. It already supports. I just said I built apps on Watch. You can already do that. And here's the package for Android Wear. Yeah. Here's the package for Android Wear. You can go use that. It gives you some helpful tools so you don't have to write the native code.
But Apple Watch you know, they like being proprietary so much. I'm sorry, they've been left out of the party. So,
yeah.
Alrighty. And Randall, you had some interesting things that might be important, because if people start making unsolvable puzzles, they might not win.
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
There was chimes happening in the background, Westminster chimes, and a cuckoo clock at the top of the hour. So one of the things I remembered from being very young and wanting to play with puzzles and things like that was that the 15 slider puzzle, the one we're all building if we're in the contest, actually has an issue in that only if you randomly generate all the numbers, still 1 through 15, even that you put 1 through 15 in it, half of those puzzles will be unsolvable. And there's a lot of details. I posted a couple of links in the chat earlier in the hour. So, no, I think it was past hour. So go back and look at those. But basically, you can't just generate random positions for your 1 through 15. Otherwise, half of those puzzles will be unsolvable, and it will frustrate your potential user. I'm told in the chat room earlier that the one that Google is providing as a sample actually checks what's called the parity of the layout to make sure that it is solvable. So please look at that code. If you're starting from scratch and not paying attention to that, you might frustrate some people. And I was thinking about actually creating one that was always unsolvable, but I thought that would just be
cruel. That'd be brutal.
Or I was going to actually sense the position of the phone when I handed it to my friend, and if it was face down, it would create the unsolvable puzzle. When it was face up, I would go, look how easy it is.
Alrighty.
I can't find that link, but if you scroll back to the chat, I'm sure someone can find it.
First hour on the show. Yeah.
Alrighty, folks. We have to cut it. We do have day jobs and significant others and dogs that need to be taken out, turned upside down, and emptied.
I have one out of the three of those. So yes, I need to be off and running there.
Well,
yes.
We're back next week, and if I remember rightly, next week is all going to be about adding Firebase to your Flutter puzzle hack project.
Oh my god, that'll be great.
So that's what we have for next week, and we'll have Puff as our guest. So join us next week, and we'll be answering also your general Flutter questions. Bye for now. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.